This week we want to start a new sermon series, and I want this to be kind of inspirational and motivational to us as we prepare, as we get ready to go into things opening back up. This new sermon series is entitled Preparing for a New Day. Preparing for a new day. I want to start this series off in the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 3. Joshua chapter 3, the Old Testament book of Joshua, chapter 3. And I want to look, reading your hearing, verses 2 through 8. Joshua chapter 3, verses 2 through 8 reads this way. So it was, after 3 days, that the officers went through the camp. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it. You may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people. So they took the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. This is the word of God for the people of God. Blessed be the name of our God. For the time that is ours to share together today, I want to talk from the simple subject, let's go in. Let's go in. My brothers and sisters, I want to suggest to you today that the majority of the people who are alive today honestly function with a mixture of different emotions. Especially when you consider the fact that where we are now is almost like the start of a brand new year. In the sense that for the last year or so, we have been functioning in a constant state of restrictions. But now the doors are just about all the way open. And just like that, we are seemingly almost as if we are at a start of a new year. Just like at the start of a new year, many of us are dealing with a mixture of emotions that range from excitement all the way to nervousness. If we would be truthful, if we would be honest today, all of us know what it is to have excitement and nervousness active in our lives at the very same time. Excited because of the prospect, possibilities, and potential of a brand new day. Nervous because in the midst of the possibilities, there is a great deal of mystery. We often get nervous because we don't know what is actually going to happen. Catch that. We get excited because there is a prospect of possibility and brand new potential. This new day that we are entering into, although for many of us it is a seemingly return, but the fact of the matter is, it is not so much as a return as it is a brand new start. And just like any brand new start, we get excited because we want to see what's going to happen in the future. But then we are still not only dealing with excitement, but we are also dealing with the nervousness because we don't actually know what tomorrow holds for us. excited because whenever you talk about tomorrow, you talk about potential and possibility, but nervous or scared because even though you have the sight of potential and possibility, you are still nervous because you don't know what's going to happen. The thing that gets me is that both of these emotions come with their own set of issues. Think about it. There are times where my excitement can push me to make some bad decisions because in my excitement, I actually fail to take the time to do proper preparation, causing me to move prematurely. And that type of move can cause me to have to deal with something that I am not really ready for. Think about it. If you don't plan, if you don't really take time to consider what the possibilities are, you just launch out in your excitement, sometimes we can put ourselves in a position where we are forced to deal with something that we're not ready to deal with. So we have a level of excitement and we have a level of nervousness because, on the other hand, this nervous, anxious feeling that we deal with, we end up not making a move because everything has to be just right. Think about it. We get nervous, we get anxious, we get questions in our minds, and we don't make a move. Even though opportunity is in front of us, we don't make a move because through the lens from which we are looking, we really can't tell what tomorrow is going to bring. And so since the unknown is oftentimes scary and frightening, I don't make a move. Even though I'm fussing and complaining about where I am, I don't make a move to go where I could be, because where I could be, I don't know what it will be. So I'll stay where I am and I'll miss an opportunity. Catch that. The sight of things opening back up brings us to a place of excitement and anxiousness at the same time. Excitement because we want to see what's going to happen, but then anxious because we don't know what's going to happen. And oftentimes, if we don't make a move, we end up missing out on an opportunity that can actually change the course of our lives. I mentioned this today because that when we look at the text that we have before us today, this is actually their story. In the book of Joshua, as you look at the book of Joshua, you will discover that the people of God are excited about the possibility that awaits them in the promised land. But at the same time, they are filled with a great deal of nervousness because they are at a place of entry without their legendary liberator and lawgiver Moses. They are on the precipice of possibility. They have the opportunity to go into a new place, but they don't have the one that has been with them and leading them all of these years. Moses, according to the first chapter of Joshua, Moses is now dead, and now they have opportunity in front of them, they have possibility in front of them, but the one that they have grown used to leading them is not with them anymore. And so they get scared because they don't know what this new upstart Joshua is going to do. Although he's not really a new upstart, he's been walking with Moses, but there's something different in Joshua that wasn't present in Moses, because you understand, Moses would pray for the people, Joshua just said cut them off. So there's something different. So even though that they understand that Joshua is there to lead them, they still have a level of nervousness because Joshua is not just like Moses. And as you Bible scholars know, by this time the children of Israel, in their history, Moses is dead, but God sends a word to them through Joshua and tells them that although Moses is dead, his plan for his people is still alive. Take note of how things have gone so far in this book. In chapter 1, Joshua is called to lead the people, and they begin to move toward accomplishing what God has instructed them to do. In chapter 2, we see the people of God moving toward checking out the land of promise so that they can have an effective plan on how to possess what has been promised. Because they understand that even though God promised it, they still have to operate with a level of intelligence in order to possess it. And it is in chapter 2 that we see that the hand of God is yet with them, because he causes a harlot by the name of Rahab to protect the two spies that were sent into the land. So now when we come to chapter 3, we now discover that their first obstacle in pursuit of the promise is ahead of them. They come to the Jordan River. This is very important because in order for them to get to the place that God has promised them, and in order for them to take possession of what God has promised them, they have to cross over this river. Notice, if you please, that God told them that in order to possess what has been promised, they would have to make a move. In other words, in order for them to get what God has promised them in their lives, they have to move from where they are to where God is trying to take them. And let me park there parenthetically to let somebody know, if you really want God to be present in your life, if you really want to see what God is going to do in your life and what God has planned in your life, at some point you got to believe that God is with you and make moves based upon the fact that you believe that God is with you. It is very interesting to me. Everybody wants things to happen in their lives, but we fail to understand that in order for things to happen, sometimes you got to make things happen. In other words, if you really want to see God moving in your life, at some point you got to make up in your mind that you believe God enough that even though you can't tell what is going to happen, even though you can't recognize where exactly you are going, you don't know all of the plan of God, but you trust God enough to make a move even in your uncertainty, because uncertainty with God is not the thing that you need to have. You need to have a certainty about God, although you have uncertainty about your situation. You may not know what God is doing, but at some point you got to remember that God promised that there will be no weapon that will be formed against you that will be able to prosper. You got to be able to remember that God promised you that when the fires come and when the floods come, it will be with you. God promised that he'd never leave you nor forsake you. So if God is with me, what are you tripping about? If God is with you, you got to take a chance and believe that God will do what God said he's going to do. There's something that really jumps out at me in the latter verses of chapter number 2. Because in verse 10, Joshua says something that in my opinion should have given the people hope and confidence. Notice in verse 10 where Joshua says, "By this you will know that the living God is among you, and that he without fail will drive out all of your enemies before you." He goes on to tell them that as soon as the priests step into the water, the flowing waters of the river will be cut off from miles away, where you can't even see the waters being cut off. In other words, what Joshua is telling them, he's saying, listen, you got to learn how to step in even when you don't understand what God is doing. But if God sees you have faith enough to step in, he'll cut the thing off that you've been worried about. At some point, somebody has got to recognize that if you really want to see God moving in your life, you got to not wait until everything is perfect. You got to stop waiting until all the stars line up. You got to stop waiting until everybody is on your side. You got to stop waiting to have everybody cheer you on. At some point, you got to recognize that if I believe God, that's all that I need in my life. If God is with me, I've got everything that I need. So he tells them to step in. The waters will dry up. The very thing that you've been worrying about will dry up. If we actually could read the Bible, you would also discover that it happened just as God said it would. So my question today of this text is, what was it that caused these individuals to experience God's power on this level? What was it that they did that allowed for them to see God move on their behalf? Well, after careful study of this text, you will come to discover that the people of God did 3 things that I believe we should view as an example to us, that if we want to see God move in our lives, we ought to follow their example. The first thing I see is right there in verses 3 and 4. The first thing I see in this text is that if we really want to see God move, if we really want to move forward, if we really want to go into the promise that God has for us, the first thing we got to do is learn how to be led by a divine presence. Be led by a divine presence. Joshua instructs the people that when the ark moves, that's when they should move. the presence of God in the ark, there were some key elements that reminded them of how good God had been. First of all, it was the rod of Aaron that represented the protection of God. There was the tablets of Moses representing the principles of God. Then there was the manna that fell from heaven that fed them, that represents the provisions of God. Check that out. God is saying, keep your eye on how I have protected you, how I have given you my principles and instructed you, and keep your eye on how I have provided for you. He says, listen, at some point, all of us have to remember that we didn't get this far by ourselves. We got this far, as the old folk used to say, leaning and trusting on the everlasting arms of God. We didn't get here because we were so smart. We got here because God made a way when there was no way. What I need all of us to understand is that when it comes to being successful in the things of God, there's a strong need for his presence to be among us. I say that based on the fact that where he is seeking to take us, we have not been that way before. Have you ever followed somebody that said, come go with me somewhere? You didn't know where you were going, and the only way you would get where they were going was you had to follow them as they were going. That's the same thing God says to us. God says, if you ever want to really discover where I'm taking you and what I'm trying to get you to, you got to not take your eyes off of me. You got to be willing to do as Ludacris says. When he moves, you got to move just like, yeah. In other words, God says to Joshua that when you see the Ark of the Covenant, when you see the Ark move, which represents the presence of God, when you see him move, that's when you move. In other words, if you're going to get where God is taking you, please hear me, you've got to keep your eyes on him. You've got to have his presence around you. You've got to have his presence with you. You cannot divorce yourself from who he is, what he's doing, and how he's doing it. You got to keep yourself connected to God. Something very interesting to me about this portion of the text, and I say that because when you look carefully, Joshua tells them when the ark moves, that's when you got to make a move. Two things come to mind when I read this. They had to be looking for the ark to move. They had to be expecting for the ark to move. Three things I should say. They had to be looking for it to move. They had to be expecting for it to move. And they themselves, like this, had to be ready to move. Y'all didn't catch it. In other words, some of us have missed the things of God because we saw God moving, but we let everything else around us hinder us from moving when God moves. My suggestion to every person who's listening to me today is that when you want God to bless your life, if you're keeping your eyes on him, keep your eyes on him, and whenever he moves in your life, be ready to move with him. Don't let your naysayers get you out of moving. Don't let those who are doubting get you out of moving. Don't let all those people who come at you saying, well, why you want to do that? Why you want to go there? Why you want to try that? Every now and then when you see God moving, you got to forget about all that stuff and go where God is going. Because guess what? Whenever you are where God is, you are in the best place you can be. Whenever you are following God, regardless if nobody goes with you, you are in the very best place you can ever be. I mentioned this today because the truth of the matter is that many of us miss out on what God is doing because we're not even expecting for God to move. You know what blows me away about? So only certain people don't get this phrase. What blows me away about church folk? Church folk will spend all year coming to church. We'll spend all of our time coming to church, listening to sermons, supposedly reading the Bible, showing up in Sunday school, showing up at Bible study, singing in the choir. But when it comes to trusting God to actually make a move, we want everything to line up. Where was your faith? Where is your faith, brother, that caused you to show up to church believing that God was going to speak to you? Where's the faith that was operating in your life that caused you, when you were tired, to still make it to choir rehearsal and sing in the choir? Where's that faith simply trust that if God makes a step and I'm following him, I gotta trust that every step that he causes me to make, he'll make sure I make it safely. In other words, if you're following God, hear me, it's not up to you to necessarily protect or provide for yourself. It's actually up to God to open doors. It's actually up to God to keep your enemies at bay. It's actually up to God to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. But some of us will never experience what God is willing to do for us because we won't trust him to make a step. Could the reason that no doors have been opened for many of us be a result of the fact that we haven't knocked on any doors? Here's a little fact that I think someone listening really needs to hear. You will be denied 100% of the time to things that you never applied for. You will never get the job that you never applied for. You will never get the advancement that you don't apply for. You will never get the promotion that you don't express interest about getting. Every now and then, you got to step out, even when you don't think it's going to happen for you, even when it's not actually a part of your own personal plan. Sometimes you got to trust that God knows best, and he's opening the door right in front of you. All you got to do is walk through the door. Stop waiting for everything to line up the way you want it to. Stop waiting for everybody to be on your team. Stop waiting for everything to be exactly the way you want it to be. Trust that God knows what he's doing. For many of us who are listening to this sermon right now, we have to move from just sitting around doing nothing and move to that place where we are looking for something to happen, as gets displayed in our activity that we involve ourselves in. Isn't it interesting that the Bible teaches us that you will find things once you start seeking? Doors will open for you once you start knocking. Things will be given to you once you learn how to ask. Y'all wonder what I'm talking about, huh? Knock, and it will be open. Seek, and you will find. Ask, and it will be given. That's what the Bible teaches. But you will never get anything, go anywhere, or receive any blessing if you don't start seeking, knocking, and looking. Very interesting to me. The book of 2 Chronicles, the people of God found themselves in a situation that should have caused them a great deal of trepidation. They were called to have a prayer meeting to ask God to assist them in what they were dealing with. They were outnumbered. The odds were stacked up against them. And in their prayer, in this corporate prayer, they all made a powerful statement to me. And here's their statement. They said these words, and I think some of us really need to pay attention to these words and incorporate them in our own lives. They said these words. They said, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. You got to catch that. They didn't know which way to go. They didn't know how things were going to turn out, but they were saying in that prayer, no matter what we don't know, we're going to keep our eyes on God. And I'm talking to somebody right now. You've been wondering what should you do? Keep your eyes on him. You've been wondering how things are going to work out. Don't worry about that. Keep your eyes on him. You've been wanting friends to come along and pat you on the back. Don't trip over that. Keep your eyes on him. It may not be comfortable. You may not like it. You may want to get out of it. But if you do what you do by keeping your eyes on him, God will lead you all the way. In their statement, what they were saying is, God, we actually don't know what's going to happen, but the one thing we do know is you're going to make something happen. Here's my word to somebody. Let me move on. Regardless of what the future holds, we have got to keep our eyes on the one, watch this, who actually has the future in his hands. Did y'all catch that? Let me say that again for you. Regardless to what the future holds, you and I have to learn how to keep our eyes on the one who actually has the future in his hands. Let me move on. The next thing the text teaches us is that when we are preparing for a new day, we must also learn how, watch this, to lend ourselves to divine purification. That's right there in verse number 5. If you pay very close attention to the text, you will discover that in verse 5, Joshua tells the people, to sanctify yourselves. I want you to pay attention to this statement because of what the word sanctify actually means. The word sanctify actually means to set apart. In other words, Joshua is telling them and us that if we really desire to experience the power, provision, and presence of God in our own lives, we must realize that he will not or cannot do what we want him to do. He cannot put blessings in a life that displays and is filled with all kinds of mess. I need you to catch this. What kind of sense would it make for God to give you money and you have yet to learn how to manage the $100 you got right now? What sense does it make for God to put you on a brand new job making more money and you have yet to learn how to act on the job you got right now? What sense would it make for God to give you a new boo and you ain't learned how to treat the boo you got? What kind of sense would it make for God to give you a brand new car and you won't even watch the car that you got right now? In other words, God says, get rid of some stuff. And it's not even about the stuff, it's about the attitude. He says, get rid of these attitudes that keep you in a place where you are right now. Get rid of those attitudes because God will not send a blessing to a messy person. God is looking for people whose mind is open, whose heart is open, whose life is available through their faith, and says, God, whatever you want me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Wherever you want me to go, that's where I'm going to go. You got to learn how to be available and unhinged to do what God wants you to do. So he says, anything that's in your life that stands in the way of God being revealed in your life, get rid of it. I know this is not a comfortable statement here, but hear me. Some of us need to get rid of some people. I ain't telling you to kill nobody, but stop calling. I'm not telling you to hurt anybody, but stop hanging out with certain people. Some of us need to learn how to separate ourselves from some people because those people have fueled our negative insight. They have fueled our negative dispositions. And sometimes you got to get rid of people that's been around you for 10, 15, 20 years. I know they love you. I know Ray and Nuck them have been around you all this time. But let me tell you something. Ray and Nuck need to go about their business and you need to pursue what God is trying to do in your life. Are y'all listening to me? You got to separate yourself from some stuff. I'm talking to somebody right now, and God desires to really bless your life, but you got so much mess in your life that God can't get the blessing into your life. Listen, let me illustrate it this way. A few years ago, I remember I wanted a brand new suit. I wanted a suit real bad. I saw this suit and I wanted it bad. And I went home, looked in the closet, and I said now to myself, I said, now if I get this suit, where am I going to put it? Got all these suits that I don't wear, all these shirts that I don't wear, all these pants that I don't wear, but that suit in the store looked really nice. What sense would it make for me to get a brand new suit just to put it in a place, watch me, that it won't actually fit in? God is saying the same thing about your and my life. He is saying to us that every now and then we got to get rid of some stuff, empty some space, get rid of some stuff because God wants to put other things in your life that's going to bless your life, but God is not going to force anything on you. God is not going to overstuff your life. God says, listen, if you want me in your life, make room for me in your life. Get rid of some people, get rid of some attitudes, get rid of some dispositions, get rid of some habits that you have so that I can fit comfortably in your life. So he says, anything that stands in the way of me getting and being where God wants me to be, I've got to get rid of it. And I'm talking to somebody right now, you've been praying all year long that God will change your life. You've been praying all year long that God will send a blessing your way. You've been praying all throughout the pandemic that God would open the door for your life to be different and better. And God where you need to be, you need to get rid of some stuff that you have acquired over time. You need to get rid of some people that you have allowed in your life over time. You need to get rid of some habits that what you've been smoking on, what you've been drinking on, what you've been snorting on. Every now and then, you got to get rid of that stuff so God can make you who he wants you to be. Need his divine presence. Then we need his divine purification. But finally, we must also learn to lean on his divine promise. That's verse 5, the B clause of verse 5 and verse number 7. Notice in the B clause of verse 5 and verse 7, God makes them a couple of promises. Notice in verse 5, he says, the reason you need to sanctify yourself is because he's going to do something great in your life. Then in verse 7, he says, I'm going to exalt you in front of everybody. He says, same people who saw you when you were down, same people who saw you when life was messed up, the same people who saw you struggling, I'm going to bless you right in their face. He said, the very people who've been talking about you all this time because you have not changed anything in your life, the same people who've been ridiculing your name, I'm going to bless you in front of them. He says, but be careful, because he says, he is doing this, watch this, not so that you can get the big head. He said, I'm doing this in this way so everybody can know that I am the same God that was with Moses. The same God who blessed the children of Israel back there. He says, I want them to understand that I am the same God. I am the one who caused manna to fall from heaven. He says, I am the one who led them with a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. He says, the same one who was with Moses back then, I am with you. I don't know if y'all get that like I do, but I'm glad that he does not need to become a different God. But he does what he does, and when he does it in my life, I have a point of reference to look back on and say, that had to be God working in my life. And I'm talking to somebody today who may not understand that God is trying to move in your life. God is trying to turn things around in your life. Yes, God is trying to bring